focused on believing in yourself and putting all your eggs in one basket and going for it. And if you've got naysayers around you, then get rid of them. They don't belong in your life.
It's the Health in the Real World podcast. It's time to start the show with Janke as your host. Here to give you everything that you need when it comes to fitness strategies. We keep it simple and easy. It's your roadmap to get healthy. You don't need equipment and you don't need a gym. Just the right strategies to get you fit and trim.
The Health in the Real World podcast is sponsored by most exercises and workouts, whether they be running, biking, elliptical, rowing machine, traditional weightlifting, or even CrossFit, do not give you a balanced workout. And when you do workouts that neglect even one area, you're out of balance, resulting in pain and injury as well. Achieve your goals with the fitness program your chiropractor would love. Visit chrisjanke.com/pod to watch the free video. Hello and welcome to Health in the Real World. I'm Chris Janke and I'm joined today with Catherine Mattice. Catherine is in HR and she specializes in helping people achieve a positive work environment. Mental health is so important, and our work environment can really affect our mental health. So Catherine, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
This is I think a great conversation because, like we were talking about, we spend so much time at work, and, you were even mentioning, people can develop even like PTSD from a bad work environment. First, before we dive into that, give us a little bit more of a background as far as who you are and your history, how you got into this work and everything like that.
Yeah. So I was working as the director of HR for an organization where there was one other sort of toxic person. He was also a director. And so he was my peer. And he was engaging in what I would call bullying behaviors. He was just yelled. He made it clear if he didn't like you, he was a micromanager. He just wasn't the greatest leader. And while I was working there, I decided to get my master's degree. And my very first semester, I had a class called The Dark Side of Communication. My degree is in communication. So it was about all of the dark human interactions. That's what that class was about. So domestic violence, sibling rivalry, those types of things, conflict. And so I, of course, had to write a paper on something that fit within the dark side of communication. And I thought, well, I'm going to write a paper on this person because he's dark in terms of communicating, and ended up just being really fascinated by what I was reading as I was writing that first paper. And everything else I did in graduate school was on this topic of workplace bullying. And so I joke, I have a master's degree in workplace bullying.
Right.
And then from there, it was just like, well, clearly this is a problem that needs to be solved. And there aren't a lot of people focusing on workplace bullying. And so I started Civility Partners. And over time, we've moved from specifically workplace bullying to the broader topic of just, positive work environments. And so we do a lot around harassment, and we do a little bit of DEI work. So really it's about helping organizations or the people within those organizations thrive.
Right. So I kind of, going back to that bullying situation, I kind of want to go two directions, because obviously there's the bully, and then there's that person that he is bullying. So so those are the two, I guess, macro categories. What are some strategies that person who's in that environment, who's getting bullied, what can they do? And then I also want to go to the other side and say, they say that bullies were usually victims themselves when they were children, especially. What can we do to help the bully?
Yeah. I've got answers for both. So cool. The key is that if you're at the receiving end of any sort of negative behavior, so starting with something like incivility, let's say you have that person in a meeting who's always interrupting others or making jokes that are a little inappropriate or unprofessional, or microaggressions. If you can nip that stuff in the bud, which you can because it's a lot easier, to deal with those behaviors, then it won't escalate. So I think one assumption people have is that people who bully are just sort of nasty people, and they've always been that way. But actually, they engage in that behavior because they've been given permission by the silence. So nobody talks to the serial interrupter. Generally, nobody is addressing that instability, and so then over time it escalates and it gets more frequent and more aggressive. So the key tip is to definitely address that behavior early. It's a lot easier, and that person's more likely to take that feedback versus if they've already been acting this way for 5 years. They've been bullying for 5 years. That's a lot harder to deal with. So if you're listening and you're thinking, gosh, I am bullied, I have a toxic person or a toxic culture, my advice for you is to pay attention to how you feel. Pay attention to your emotions, pay attention to the physical reactions you're having, because we do have physical reactions to our stress. And recognize that if you've tried to talk to the employer about solving this problem and they're not lending you the help that you need, then it may be time to leave. And I hate to give that advice, but nobody's going to care for you the way that you care for you. And if your employer is making it clear they're not interested in creating a civil work environment, then maybe it's time to go.
How much, sorry to interrupt, but I just had a question directly about what you just said. How much of it, you just mentioned, like you mentioned going to your employer, how much of it is like, how much would you recommend the person getting bullied going directly to the bullier and just saying, don't talk to me like that?
I absolutely recommend that, because for a couple of reasons. One, if you can stand up for yourself, everyone likes the path of least resistance. And so if you're making it difficult for this person to engage in bullying behaviors against you, they'll probably find someone new, which kind of stinks. You're passing the buck to the next person.
And then that other person gets a chance to stand up for themselves.
Yeah,
too, right?
exactly. But yeah, I would absolutely recommend sitting down with the individual to say, hey, I'm feeling that this is how I'm being treated. I'd like to talk to you about it. Can we work on our relationship? And that might help. That definitely could help. The other bonus to that is that if you do end up in HR, it'll be a lot better for you if you can say, I've tried to solve this on my own in these ways and it didn't work, and that's why I'm here, versus, I'm here for your help, but I haven't tried to help myself. That doesn't go over so well with HR. So
right. I'm thinking about my kids right now specifically. If a kid is, two of my kids are on the playground and one comes up to me and, Daddy, da, 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 and that's the first thing I want to know. Well, have you guys even tried to resolve this? Have you talked to your sister yet?
Yeah.
Versus like just coming to me every single time something happens and expecting me to just swoop in and save the day. Right.
Yeah. And if you have a good HR professional, good HR professionals will coach too. So if you do go to HR and say, this is happening, HR's role should be to, just like a parent, coach. Well, if the kids say, no, we haven't worked it out, then you can provide some coaching, right? Well, you could say, well, maybe you could say this to your sister or try this. And that's what HR should be doing. But HR has this kind of reputation that you only go to them when it's harassment or something really awful. But you got to be doing things over time, and coaching over time. And then, so HR should be involved all the way.
Right.
In terms of people who engage in bullying behavior, the problem is that, again, they're allowed to act this way. People keep silent. They're often very high performers. And so leadership has a hard time calling them out because they're nervous that the person will go, well, forget it, I'll just quit then. I want to act that way, so I'm just going to leave, which is not the case at all. So if leaders can step in and say, look, you can't act this way. You're very valuable. The work that you do is good, but how you're doing it is not working. It's causing trauma. And we need to adjust that. That's the first step, is to just be very clear about expectations for behavior. And then I do specialize in coaching these individuals. And what I've learned over time is they actually, most of the time, have no idea the impact that they have. So they know people are frustrated by them or think they're kind of maybe difficult to work with. But they're lost on the real damage they're causing. So that's helpful too. It's a real slap in the face for me to come. So I do interviews with people they work with, and then I present that to them. And they often feel kind of traumatized. They're saying things like, gosh, I didn't know that this is how I was perceived. I wouldn't want to work for me either. I can't believe this. That's not my intention. So it's not that they're enjoying causing problems and hurting people. They just don't understand that they are. So that, you got to set expectations about behavior and then give them some resources to help them change. And that's how you help them.
I think that's really good to know. And again, especially, going back to the main premise that, health is affected by our workplace so much, but that just seems like a very common sense, very straightforward solution. It's just like, hey, just go right to them. And I'm sure you see that most of the time that person's going to respond in that way. Like, wow, I had no idea. Right.
Yep.
And they're probably feeling overloaded and overwhelmed themselves. And they have just very poor ways of dealing with it. They'll dump everything on you, right?
You know what I found? This isn't happening in a vacuum, this relationship between the target and the person engaging in bullying. It's happening in the context of the organization. So in addition to this person sort of having permission because of the silence that nobody's calling them out and telling them to stop, I always find, as I'm coaching, all sorts of organizational problems where the organization is sort of facilitating their behavior. Just to give you an example, I coached a woman who she had one individual that she really went after. She was abrasive all around, but there was one person getting the real brunt of it. And she was frustrated with his performance. And the culture of the organization was not giving feedback. Don't give feedback. We don't do that around here, which blows my mind. I don't know how you have a successful business without feedback. So part of the coaching is we went through this whole process of how can you have a performance conversation with this guy? How can you help him get better? See his success as your success rather than getting after him. And she was so proud of herself. She went to her boss, like, I'm going to have this conversation with this guy. I just wanted to lay it out for you. And the boss said, you can't have that conversation with him. And, that's not our culture. And she just was like, I give up because, so that's an example where she was honestly just reacting to a lot of frustration that she was having, and not being able to address this person's behavior was frustrating for her. And so not to make excuses for her, but any of us would be frustrated if we had a poor performer that we felt that we couldn't address their performance issues,
Right.
So,
Right. And that seems like a very weird policy. Don't give feedback.
Yeah,
It's like,
it was all very like, give the sugar-coated version. You can't be so straightforward.
It's like the analogy of like the gas, the gas gauge on your car. It's like, all right, when it gets to E and the light goes on, do you go to the gas station and fill it up, or do you like put a piece of tape over it so you can't see it?
Yeah.
No, I don't want to see this. I don't want to, this is bad. This I feel offended by the gas gauge. I can't see it.
Yeah. And I just have so many examples like that where it's clear that, so that's a good, if any leaders and employers listening, to really think about like, why is this happening in our organization, as opposed to that person's behaving poorly. They're the problem, but they're a good performer. So we're just not going to address it because we're afraid that they'll up and leave. Like all of these assumptions are just so wrong. They are happy to change because they don't want to be perceived that way.
Right. And I think most people, if not all people, want to work in an environment that's healthy and there's good communication all around. And if anybody is in that environment that is toxic, even if it's you, you kind of want to stop. You want to get that out. And so I would imagine too, again, people who are doing that maybe just have poor coping skills in that way, or they feel overloaded and maybe they just want a little help. And like, hey, I've yelled at my coworkers 3 times in the last month, and I really need help getting a handle on this so that we can work together better. And
Yeah. And that's really the thing, going back to mental health culture, organizational culture needs to encompass mental health. And if you're a leader or an employer who's focused on helping your people thrive, then mental health is part of that. And you would recognize that the way this bully is engaging with others is damaging them. They may be getting results on paper. The P&L shows that they're doing really great, but people are literally developing PTSD before your eyes because of the way they're treated. That's just that it's not okay with me. And so mental health and caring for your employees has to be part of the culture. And if you have a leader who's not willing to allow that behavior to happen, everyone else will follow suit, versus other organizations where the leader makes it clear that productivity is more important than behavior. Then that's the kind of culture that's going to cause toxic behavior, because everybody's sort of clawing to win. So the way we are treated at work work is a big part of who we are. It's a big part of our self-esteem and our self-concept. And so if you're not treated well while you're at work, then it's literally damaging, your whole psyche, your soul. And that's what we need to recognize. Work and life are not separate.
Right. I mean, we spend more than half of our waking hours during the week at work, right? And most people, obviously the paycheck is important, but most people go to work for other reasons, right? Because we could easily find another job.
Mm-hmm.
Most people could very easily just find another job, but it's like, yeah, it's the satisfaction. It's I'm creating something, or
Mm-hmm.
I like
I'm
my
part of a team.
coworkers, or
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, I think that's very good. I think you're right. Like managers and leaders who are only bottom line money driven are missing the other part of the equation, because even if you're only money driven, you got to realize that if you're creating an environment where people are getting PTSD, you're going to have such a high turnover.
Yep.
And your bottom line is going to suffer. So even if you're purely self-centered and self-driven and money-driven, you still need to think about this.
Yeah, the bottom line is still being affected.
Right. But I think most people,
it's not about people for you, it's still the bottom line is being
right. It's like it sounds like almost like you need to do like an Uncle Scrooge thing with the ghost of Christmas past, present, and future, right? You need to like see, look, and this is how you affected this person when you yelled at them, and this is how the bottom line is being affected, and this. So just like exposing what that behavior is doing. But,
exactly. And
really
I'll say too, with the great resignation, as they're calling it, or the great reshuffle, I've heard a lot of varieties of that phrase, with everybody upping and leaving thanks to COVID. I think, I've had clients who are talking to me kind of like, well, everybody has turnover right now. And I'm like, well, yes, there's a lot of turnover, but you also have to ask yourself why people want to leave you. Why? So yeah, you could just say, well, that's how it is, but you might want to ask yourself, why are they looking elsewhere? What's happening here or not happening here that's causing people to want to leave? It's not just that, hey, everybody's leaving. It's people are figuring out that, or the grass is greener. They're thinking, well, I haven't really liked the way I've been treated here, and everybody else is leaving, so I guess I will too. Right. So looking at those reasons and wanting to understand that is important.
And I think that's a little bit, I don't know, that's kind of defeatist if you're thinking of it like that. Well, people are leaving every corporation, because obviously they're leaving some places, but they're going to other places. So if there's a mass exodus from your organization, where are they going and why?
Exactly.
What's the other place giving them or providing that I'm not? And those are just really good questions to ask in general, right? Just to get a better result.
That's a great point. They're not quitting the working world. They are going somewhere else. So what is that? Why are they looking elsewhere from my organization? What drew them into their new job? And kind of tracking that is important.
Right. 100%. Well, Catherine, I like ending the show going very big picture. My last question for you is, if you were called before, let's say like a university, and you're going to give the graduation speech, the commencement, motivation, let's say like a 30-second to 1 minute motivational speech on how you think the graduates can get the most out of their lives. Go very big picture, different life lessons that you've learned along the way. What would be your 30-second to 1 minute motivational
Oh gosh, the pressure. My 30 seconds would be focused on believing in yourself and putting all your eggs in one basket and going for it. And if you've got naysayers around you, then get rid of them. They don't belong in your life. Believe in your dreams. And I know this from experience. When I started a consulting firm focused on workplace bullying, everybody told me that that was ridiculous and I should be a leadership coach or communication skills. I said, nope, I'm going to focus on workplace bullying because I know it's a problem. And good thing I didn't listen to all of those naysayers, because here I am. So my experience is, if something in your gut is telling you to go for it, then do it.
Nice. Absolutely. Catherine, how do people get in touch with you online? What's your website, social media accounts?
I'm all over the place. Civilitypartners.com is my website. You can Google me. I'm on LinkedIn. We do a newsletter every week that's full of lots of tips, for going from individual tips for something like standing up for yourself if you're being bullied, all the way up to leadership and changing your culture and everything in between. So I'm around. Just Google me.
Nice. Sounds good. And that term you're going to Google is Catherine Mattice. You're based in San Diego?
I am.
And well, Catherine, I really appreciate you joining me today on Health in the Real World.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right.
Thanks for listening to the Health in the Real World show. Make sure to like and subscribe and comment down below. Visit mycorebalance.com to learn more.